Welcome. This is going to be a talk about the Obeya Builder's Playbook, effective Obeya design patterns. My name is Lawrence Bonnema. I am Obeya Sensei and also an agile management consultant for, the better part of 24 years already. The thing I was going to do, and I'm still going to do, is talk you through the 11 Obeya principles, but then with a twist. And the twist being, because if this is the principle you want to improve, what are 3 plays that you can do as an Obeya builder to really max out the awesome? First play, obviously, facilitate dynamic stand-up meetings, and you could call them daily scrums if you want to, and maybe a question of the day. And I can hear people already thinking, yeah, but you promised me builder, right? So what about the data? What about like visualizing that? So play number 3 is always one that has to do with hard data. So one thing that I would do for a builder to get started there is to use sentiment analysis on the meeting notes. Now that is a nice machine learning model that you can use to just take all the notes that you have from all your meetings, and you can just automatically have them transcribed, of course, and then understand what the emotions were during those meetings. If we go to the second one, people are committed to engage in continuous improvement, then the first 2 ones, they're probably pretty obvious, right? Create an obstacle board with the impediments, make sure that you have maybe a continuous improvement kudos system you can reward yourself or individuals. But then from the AI/ML version of this, you can employ predictive analytics to identify potential future obstacles based on trend analysis. This is just Excel on steroids and planning it forward. And then the key thing there is you can then, if you look at the trends, proactively manage them. Principle number 3. And if you look at the plays that you can do there as an Obeya builder, the first one is to start meetings with a reminder of the team's purpose. Now, this may seem like a host thing, and it is, because definitely hosts would do this. But as a builder, make room for this creed to be very, very crystal clear. That purpose statement of a team, that make sure that it's prominently displayed and referred to in each session that makes use of the Obeya. Now, for the nerds among us who want them some AI and machine learning, you can use text mining techniques. And those text mining techniques I would do on project documentation, but that's because I'm a recovering project and program manager. You can also use them on any other type of documentation if you want to ensure that language is aligned with the stated purpose. And that may seem also like, really, you can have AI check for language? Yes, you can. Item number 4, you see here the 4th Obeya principle. Key thing here is to map out strategic objectives alongside current initiatives, and then maybe put a timeline on it. If you then conduct regular alignment checks with stakeholders to ensure that you're still in sync with the broader organizational strategy, that would be awesome. And then my favorite thing here from a building perspective is just implement a strategy alignment tool, obviously powered by AI, that analyzes project updates for, again, that strategic alignment. The key thing there is it can offer you also some real-time feedback, which is amazing, especially if you look at those Obeya boards. They start to become almost dynamic. Principle number 5. And again, play number 1 here is customer journey maps. We've known about this for ages. We're teaching that also in Obeya Builder and Host classes. The key thing there is to just map it out and, in my opinion, make them beautiful, because beautiful things on the wall tend to be better to look at. But in a very specific case, from a building perspective, I would make sure that it's beautiful to look at, but still pretty boring. So pastel colors and maybe lots of grays, so that whatever color you use really highlights there is something that needs highlighting. And my preferred colors there are just the classic ones, like green and red to signal active learning or some success that you want to celebrate or zoom in on. Now, play number 2 is invite customers into your Obeya to share experiences. That too would mostly be associated with a host, but the key thing here is if you make that available also as a data source and make sure that those things, when they're, for example, remotely input into an Obeya session, are analyzed through all those previous things that I told you about, then you get a really, really powerful customer feedback loop going on that you can study also for patterns. Because oftentimes customers will tell you that they're disappointed 1 hour and they tend to be, well, a lot more positive the next. And that also talks to what you could do here in terms of AI and machine learning. Analyze that feedback data, identifying trends and insights. Number 6, the Obeya meetings have a rhythm and sync. Now, I'm all about rhythm. It's born into me. So I like that notion in particular. The key thing here, of course, is to just schedule Obeya sessions alongside the natural rhythm of your organization. This may be a little bit of a flippant thing to say, but a lot of companies don't even do that, right? So they start with their Obeya as if it's a separate thing. And it really isn't. As a builder, make sure that people understand the Obeya is not supposed to introduce any new meetings. You take the existing ones and you make them better by holding them in the Obeya. And maybe change their agendas because you improve over time, and that will then be reflected in the Obeya as well. But just create an Obeya, start doing your meetings there as opposed to somewhere else. In my experience, having a separate set of Obeya meetings usually tires people out really quickly and makes them wonder, why are we doing yet another framework with lots of meetings? I thought we were gonna get some work done. Obviously, you want to integrate operational data dashboards that update in real time. And the real-time thing is really something that tends to be hard to do, not just because of security settings, but also because we just don't know. More on that later. But first, in terms of AI and machine learning, I would use time series analysis here. Makes sense because that identifies rhythm. And now you can visualize the rhythm also, the real rhythm, not the rhythm you hope you have, but the rhythm the data actually shows that you have. And if you overlay that to your ideal type rhythm, what you'll get is, well, like a heartbeat analyzer. Are we having an arrhythmia or not? Here is number 7. Make sure that in the Obeya you have designated zones for different types of information. The 6-panel approach comes to mind. The 5-panel approach from Leading with Obeya is also really awesome. You could do a PDSA cycle, go very short on it, or Deming, if that's what you prefer as a title. And then make sure that the information on those sections really sticks to that zone. For example, KPIs, product statuses, and stuff like that. I think that's table stakes. Most of us will do that. And then most of us will also do play number 2, really clear color coding. So I put them here mostly so as to not forget when you're building them. So here too, play number 3 is my favorite one. Implement a dashboard that dynamically adjusts to the content. Yes, I'm talking dynamically adjusting, so yes, I'm talking IT systems here. This is definitely where I would put up a big honkin' monitor in the Obeya to make sure that you have real-time data being pushed into a system. And one of the things I'm learning, and this actually talks to the next section, is that most real data analysts, so the people that studied this stuff, they tend to think our Obeya stuff is kind of boring in terms of data. And that is good news, because when they say it's boring, they mean they can't be bothered, which is the bad part of the news. But the good part of the news is they have algorithms for it. They can just click on, turn on, and they work out this for you. It's like magic, really. Reflecting a good understanding of the flow of work. Obviously, that is what we would use a Kanban for in some way, shape, or form. If you want to visualize the flow of your work and really get some insight there, a Kanban system, a real one, not the to-do, doing, done one that we sometimes associate with agile frameworks, but the one that it really reflects the actual steps you take in creating value for your organization. If you create a Kanban like that, then that alone will provide insight, and it allows you to truly measure the stuff that matters. You can do play number 3, where you mine that workflow data for insights, and then create improvements that suggest optimal flow of that work. Principle number 9 from a builder perspective. The Obeya is an attractive and available area. I like that because here, the Obeya Association clearly agrees with me that beauty is not waste. And I like that. I'm a graphic recorder and a facilitator at heart too. And I just like beautiful pictures, even though they told me in Japan that it was wasteful. I think it actually has something to add. And if your Obeya space is like really inviting and it's comfortable to be there, it has natural light preferably, and maybe some plants, that will encourage just a better gathering and therefore a better conversation. I'd like you to keep your Obeya open and accessible, and I mean literally, so don't make it a locked room, unless, of course, you have data there that not everybody can see, but I would lock the whole wing then, not the Obeya room. And then make sure that it's also ready for impromptu discussions. We do that with our own Obeya at the Obeya Academy here. Anybody can walk in there and just have a meeting, and then usually they walk out having had a look at stuff on the wall. Sometimes it informs decisions, sometimes it just informs, and they think, yeah, they have some Lego stuff up there. Weird, let's ask about it. And still, beautiful conversations emerge. I would use a scheduling AI to optimize the use of that room if that ever becomes a problem. Now this I have to admit, I just had to think of what could play number 3 be here. Let's have a look at principle number 10, the data. From a builder perspective, this of course is where true heavenly Obeya nerdiness starts, because this is what it's all about, right? Getting the right information, making sure that we look at the truth. The key here is make sure that the data is regularly presented. Any data that is not regularly presented is probably not supposed to be there. And then track relevant KPIs. Okay, good. Table stakes again. Play number 2. Conduct data deep dive sessions with people that are in the Obeya that make use of it. Because oftentimes I find that people, when you ask them what's that report doing there, they don't even know. And it could be really helpful as a builder to help your host there and say, this is where the information comes from. This is the owner of the information. And then maybe even bring her into the Obeya so that she can explain, okay, so this is where all that data comes from. This is what we do to it. This is the number that you're looking at, so that they can truly understand the relationship between what they're looking at in the Obeya and real life. There again, of course, you can use machine learning to analyze the complex data sets, because sometimes it's just a bunch of numbers and you don't really immediately see any correlations there. And what's worse, even if you do see correlations, you may see stuff that isn't actually true. I have a particularly nasty habit of doing that, it looks like this number goes up and therefore this must be the truth, and then the data says no. So really good to, again, analyze those data sets for predicting trends before you take any decisions on it. A key thing here though, interestingly, was not play number 3, but play number 2. Really do those data deep dives, because that truly matters. That brings us to principle number 11. Principle number 11 being that data owners ensure that the information is always current. Now, from a very table stakes perspective, you would use data stewards, right? So anybody who is responsible for a particular data set, I would, as a builder, make sure that people know. So the names and maybe even photos or avatars of those people are up on the wall as well, so that you can either call them or come and visit them, maybe invite them. In any way that you humanize the data that you see there by making sure that you know which human is updating the data. Play number 2, again, is the interactive dashboard. Do that mostly for stuff that you're currently doing that you want to check the results for, because too many screens in your Obeya, if it's a physical one, tend to not be, particularly awesome, and also makes it instantly very expensive. The other thing being that if it's digital, having multiple data streams come into a board that need to real-time grab data from other production systems tends to be taxing on processors, but also taxing on underlying authorization schemes. So if you really want real-time data, make a choice as to which ones you really want to visualize. If you want close to real-time data, you can of course just go with a business intelligence tool. There are several great options out there that you can use to provide you with like a data mart that you can use to feed your Obeya, and that maybe periodically, a couple of times a day or overnight, is updated with all the data you would want to dynamically suck into your Obeya dashboards. And again, now I'm not talking physical Obeyas, I'm talking digital ones that you for example, structure with Obeya. Now, having said that, a lot of you will be thinking, dude, could you just ease me into this with a couple of plays, I wouldn't say for beginners, but a couple of foundational plays to really get you on your way. And of course, I can do that. For the first set of principles in quadrant number 1, the yellow one, hence the yellow balloons, I would, as a simplified play for the first principle, say just start with a stand-up. Focus that stand-up on a single visual display of current stuff that you're doing. Yes, that could be one of those to-do doing done boards, but it could also be your Kanban that I already mentioned, is where I personally would start the Obeya and build it out from there. As you do that, that will probably either introduce the concept of coming together there to see and learn and act, but probably in your environment, that's where you already are. So just make sure that you start building the Kanban where that current Obeya board is. Then, to foster a culture of continuous improvement, implement a really simple feedback loop mechanism. Again, this can be as simple as actually really doing sprint retrospectives, but you could also make it a little bit funnier and have a comment box or a digital forum where people can just drop improvements, and then periodically, I would actually check that daily, not just once every sprint or once every week, or to make sure that really interesting suggestions are taken up immediately, so you get into the habit of real lean, so to speak, because there you would never wait with an improvement. And then highlight and act on one improvement at a time. At least one a month, just to get you started if you're not really into that yet, but never more than one at the same time. And that is just a pro tip. It still feels not awesome if you had 15 and you only did 3, which is why I encourage you to select just one, get it done, and then select the other one. Really make that part of your exercise in flow. And yes, that means you put it on that Kanban board I just mentioned. So this is how that all comes together. Let's see how that works for the next step here. The second quadrant, where you have more principles and therefore more plays. The simplified play to communicate your purpose clearly is a one-page visual. It really can't be easier than that, so that you can see, okay, so this is where we're going, this is where we're now, this is the road towards that goal, and essentially have your own Toyota kata graph there that communicates the current purpose and the direction and the path really clearly. And that already connects purpose to strategy in a very real sense, because again, you started with that Kanban. To the left of it, you now have your purpose in a really awesome diagram that feeds into that Kanban. Then what remains is linking strategy to customer experience. And for that, I would take one of those modern customer journey maps, as opposed to a value stream map or something like that, and really show the value stream in action, because that's how I think of customer journey maps. So, and something that really happens, the journey that they're making. The other play I would add is to make sure that you schedule Obeya meetings around key operational milestones or events, especially those events. Now, I'm not talking about classical project management milestones and events. I'm actually talking about, for example, Scrum events. Make sure that you have those in your Obeya, for example. That would be ideal. But also make them into events, which is meetings that people actually would like to go to. If you're just getting started, a monthly cadence, because that tends to go over well with organizations, or as fast as you can. Right? Faster tends to be better because you shorten the learning cycle, and that's a real thing in Obeyas. Did I mention not to introduce any new meetings, if at all possible? Because that is really, really important. Now, creating a logical and practical flow of information, we've already started doing that with the advice that we had in the first 2 quadrants. But the simplified play here is to also really clearly mark that. And what I want you to think about there is like a museum, where if you walk through it, you have these old school plaques that say what you're looking at and actually give you some of the information. Oh, this is what I'm looking at. Oh, so this is why this is cool and awesome. And also to onboard new people, because you can just show them the room and then ask them, What do you see when you walk into our Obeya? That's actually one of my favorite tests. Almost all Obeyas fail that test. You cannot have a new person that has not yet been truly onboarded in most of the Obeyas that I see in the wild, and then they understand what they're looking at. That is how good those placards are supposed to be. That's the other thing. Basic Kanban board, map out the stages of the work from start to finish, and get after it. This is what I mean when I say just put a sticky on the wall and get started. It's my key gripe also, not just with the framework and method and all the other stuff I've learned. This is what they meant when they told me all beauty was waste in Japan. Because there, it really starts with just some information, and everything else we need just grows out from there. And when that turns into something beautiful, that's awesome. That's okay. But you don't have to design that in first. It becomes beautiful also in the way that it organically grows, and you can beautify it as it goes along. And this is one way to also rein in your inner control freak. Now, making sure the Obeya is inviting and accessible, the simplified play there would be, again, to make it comfortable and welcoming. To end with that quadrant, the simplified play for analytics-driven decision-making would be to introduce a single and straightforward dashboard that only tracks one or two metrics. This is hard because now you need to make a choice, and a lot of teams seem to have trouble doing that. Plus, a lot of teams are overloaded with stuff they measure for others. But two key metrics that you truly use. But the metrics that you truly use, make them bigger, make them bolder, make them more visible, make them graphs, make them huge graphs, make them posters. So that you know these are the numbers that we're really using to feedback learning in our Obeya. Make information accessible and attractive. I just had to add that and emphasize that. Make sure that there is a team member in the team that uses this Obeya that is the information curator, responsible for keeping the Obeya visuals updated and very clear. Tend to be much more powerful than over-stylized digital charts. But just try this out. It's truly magical. Now, I can hear some of you thinking, yeah, but what if this all goes wrong? What if people don't want to? I have, well, not news for you. Almost anybody is resistant to change. So that's actually a good sign. That means they care about what they're doing. So what I would do there is show them why the Obeya helps them care for what they're doing better. And if you can't really convince them, then don't start yet. It's as simple as that. Because it's not about the Obeya. Even though, yes, I truly believe Obeya will make almost anything better. But that golden hammer syndrome that we all have with stuff that we love, we should not force others to enjoy it as much as we do. So the key thing there, start small. Make the change as easy as possible. Keep asking yourself, what would make this safe to try? Now, my pro tip here is to invite people as opposed to force people. So don't tell them you're going to do something with Obeya and you're going to love it. Tell them how much you love it and why, and then invite them to come have a look. However, if you've done what I tend to do, and you've created your Obeya with everything that you can think of because you wanted to max out the awesome, that can create problem number 2, overwhelm. With the visual management stuff that is all up there and that people really don't understand what they're looking at. And the only true way to avoid that is to co-create your Obeya so that they know what is in there because they put it up there. And that means you should start minimally. The absolute rock bottom minimum of information. And then build it out from there. Maybe have a plan already in your head. So this is what these are the scenarios I'm looking at. But don't go all in immediately, because that will definitely overwhelm. Now, to align with organizational strategy, the challenge there being that usually it isn't. There's no true alignment, and that is something that becomes visible by having a strong disconnect in one side of the Obeya, and then there's lots of stuff happening over there, but no real path that logically flows from one section to the other. That's what I'm talking about here. I would just use regular reviews to make sure that those become apparent, and I would draw them really simply. Maybe even just take lines of thread, or if it's digital, just connect the dots literally from one section of the board to the other so that people see that either there are connections or there aren't. And actually where there aren't any connections, that is interesting. So there's a strategy that we're not really doing anything about, or we're over-investing in part of the strategy and therefore some of the stuff is not getting done. That becomes clear when you see all those lines intermingling, and that becomes something like a musical score that talks to the rhythm of the organization. Now you can use that to maintain engagement, but keeping meetings, especially actually if you have them to a steady rhythm, meetings tend to become their own kind of evil because they just happen. People feel obliged to go there. We have the same agenda every time. And as much as that can help, it can also make something really, really, really boring. And therefore, key meetings, you should find which ones are truly key by maybe starting with having none of them. So be flexible with the scheduling of Obeya sessions to reflect the actual pace of work. What I found hard to actually write down because I couldn't really think that a lot of you were going to do this. So this may be the most revolutionary advice. Start with a meeting moratorium. Just cut all the meetings for a month and then see which ones happen naturally. Those are the ones you should definitely have and make room for in your Obeya. This is the data one. The solution to this challenge is to assign clear responsibilities for updating each type of information. Keeping it simple, moving on to physical space limitations. This one is really dear to my heart because we have this teeny tiny space where we have our own Obeya and we have like this big honkin' Obeya in it. So the key thing there is in that case, digital tools, if you don't have the space, can actually make the space bigger virtually. Number 7, that's something more is upcoming in the near future there from the Obeya Association, the scaling of Obeyas, because as organizations grow, but also as Obeyas tend to get used more and more, the question how they interconnect becomes more relevant. In my opinion, that is also where digital tools come into play because it's really, really hard to interconnect Obeyas physically. But if you create a scalable model for the Obeya that can be replaced across teams, then yes, you can easily make it better. Some lean metrics then, really quickly. This is a totally made up pie chart. It says so on the slide. These are metrics that I would advise you to start tracking for your Obeya to see how they're better. And yes, of course, I would also advise you to use mean metrics, cycle time, process time, work item age, throughput. And this was Lawrence. And for the Obeya Summit, happy to sign off.